Hey guys, I wanted to jump on because it's almost Australia Day, and with that brings a lot of emotion every single year. It's the same thing every year. You'd think that we would get used to it, but apparently we don't. It's actually getting worse in my opinion. I've obviously been speaking about it a lot, just saying how we should all celebrate and how we should all be united and celebrate how far our country's come, etc., everything that Australia Day once used to stand for before it became this national holiday of bigots and racists, apparently. So yeah, a lot of emotions around this time of year. They're all coming out of the woodwork and apparently landing in my direct message inbox on Instagram and TikTok. That's fine, I can handle them. But I did want to draw attention to it because a lot of it overlaps with things I've spoken about before, just in terms of freedom of speech. I had someone yesterday tag me in a reel they made on Instagram saying that I'm a massive racist and I should be punched in the face. A racist for what reason? I don't know. She couldn't explain it to me. She just said that I was racist and that a punch in the face will probably fix that. It's always the ones who are so peace-loving and wanting everyone to get along and love people from different ethnicities and genders and sexualities that then want violence on me. I don't know how I track these ones. But it is ironic, especially when I have never once and never will inflict or say that I want to inflict violence on anyone. It is not my jam. I don't like it. This woman also referred to me as a colonizer time and time again. Trolls really need to do their fact checking before making social media posts. At least I do that, because if she did her fact checking, she would know that I have not one drop of British blood in me. Therefore, I cannot be a colonizer. My grandparents weren't born here. Therefore, I am very, very far removed from the atrocities that happened in 1788. So I am not part of this circus. In another direct message yesterday, I was told that I am a guest on Indigenous land and I need to acknowledge that. Now, this was an interesting one because I've never actually received that insult before, but it made me wonder, at what point does the land go from being Indigenous to being all of our land? Was it ever Indigenous? Because saying I'm a guest on Indigenous land comes with massive ramifications. It's not just a throwaway line. Obviously, this person used it as that to make a point. But if the government were to look at it like that, that would have huge effects on everyone who is a landowner in this country, a legitimate landowner where they bought a house. So I started thinking, if I went down to the beach and I claimed a patch of grass there, just up from the beach, and lived on it for a couple of weeks, then claimed that it was my own patch of grass, and then someone came through, took that patch of grass from me, either violently or non-violently. They then took over the patch, they built a beautiful house on it, they've raised a family on it, generations went by, the patch became bigger and bigger, they built some more houses on it, and eventually that whole area around my initial patch of grass became this amazingly built up, very valuable area because it's near the beach. And now that family and all of their descendants are pretty well off. They're doing quite well. Would my great grandchildren then be able to go into that area and say, well, my grandmother was here first. She actually lived on this small patch of grass over here. I can show you. Therefore, I want all of the money from the sales of these houses in this entire area to go to me when you sell them. Should I be allowed to do that? Hell no. Of course I shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I would never in my dreams suggest that that is the way to go. And by no means am I saying that we should forget about all Indigenous history. No way, not at all. I think that the way we do it is really good. I think that we've got a great balance in terms of acknowledging Indigenous history, paying tribute to them, providing them with everything that they could ever need to prosper and flourish in this society, at the same time as celebrating the progress that we've made and that our forefathers have worked so hard over hundreds of years to create for us. And I think a little bit of gratitude for that doesn't mean that we are racists. Simply acknowledging that progress has been made, and throughout that progress has unfortunately been bloodshed and atrocities, does not mean that you're racist. At what point is this everlasting, perpetual guilt trip going to end? And once again, let me make this so clear. I'm not advocating for ignoring our history whatsoever. I think it's fantastic that Indigenous history is taught in schools especially. And I think it's fantastic that Indigenous art and culture is kept alive through so many different avenues. That's imperative to the survival of our nation. But that doesn't mean that we are racist if we celebrate how far we've come and the progress that we've made since 1788. I keep asking the same question. I'm just not sure what it is that these Indigenous activists want. And you know what? It's hardly ever actual Indigenous people pushing this agenda. It's always the Sydney University types, the blue-haired, the pro-Palestinian, the pro-trans. They're always jumping on the agenda of the minorities when they don't even know or they haven't experienced what these minorities are dealing with. There are plenty of Indigenous people living all across the country who are completely satisfied with their lives and how they're being treated by the government and by colonizers. It's just these lefties who continuously want to make trouble and make a victim of themselves and minority groups who don't even want to be victims that are causing all of this tension and unrest and division within our own society. Calling me a racist or a bigot because I think that celebrating our progress and how far we've come as a country together and all of these cultures that we can have in this country and live very joyously and harmoniously side by side is such a big achievement. Just look at the state of the world at the moment. People cannot live side by side without attempting to kill each other, and we have all of these different nationalities and ethnicities and races living so harmoniously side by side next to each other, embracing each other, embracing hundreds of different cultures that we have in this country. And I want to celebrate that, and someone calls me racist? This is a total symptom of privilege and being so bored in your own life that you just search for problems everywhere. And I don't know why we are the only country that this happens in. Is it tall poppy syndrome? Is it that we just have too much, that we're just too well off, that a sector of society are just so bored that they need to come up with issues? This doesn't happen anywhere else. Look at the US, for example. What have they got? They've got Memorial Day, they've got Thanksgiving, they've got Columbus Day, President's Day, Remembrance Day. All of these holidays celebrating how much of a fantastic country the US of A is. And yes, some people may call them patriotic and overly so, but man, they are united. They are proud of their flag. And you know what? They are also arguably the greatest country on earth. And you don't get that way by being divided, like we are here in Australia. Let's call a spade a spade. We are very divided against racial lines. And that's not because we're racist people. That's because there's a very vocal minority whose sole aim in life is to tear us apart. And for some reason, they're getting cut through with the government. If we were to celebrate all of those holidays like they do in the US, we would be called racist. We try and celebrate one holiday, Australia Day, and all hell breaks loose. Imagine trying to celebrate, 6, 7 national holidays? Oh my gosh, the conversation would just never end. I just cannot fathom what is so wrong about celebrating what we've achieved since 1788. In case you didn't realize, the country is a vastly different place from what it was in 1788 when the Brits landed. And yes, to get to this place, bad things happened, atrocities happened, but I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news or simply just reality, but this is what happened back in the day. This is what history is. And digging your head in the sand is not going to help anyone learn from the past. These people always talk about colonization. Okay, let's talk about colonization. There are a handful of countries in the world that have never been colonized. They are Afghanistan, China, Saudi Arabia, Japan, Tonga, Bhutan, Iran, Thailand, Nepal, and Ethiopia. That's it. Every other country in the world has been colonized at one point in history. And let me tell you, the colonization was so much worse than what the Brits did here. It was bloody, it was callous, but that is history. But that is history and that is humanity. And I think these activists think that the Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal Australians, are truly the only people who have ever been colonized in history. And it's simply not true. They truly think that Indigenous Australians have been the only victims. And no, it doesn't make what happened to them any less severe or any less heartbreaking. History is a tough thing to swallow for anyone. But to paint white Australians like they are the devil incarnate, and especially current day white Australians, which I mean, they're far and few between now, aren't they? Because we're such a rich multicultural country. Guilting anyone with an Anglo-Saxon background into believing that we, not me, because I'm not Anglo-Saxon, but that they are racist because of what happened hundreds of years ago is not right. Every other country, and remember, it's pretty much all of them, have been able to find a balance between remembering the past, acknowledging it, but also moving forward in a really significant way to be better for their people, to create better lives for their people and for their descendants. Being stuck in the past, like I feel that Australia is really holding us back. And I've also asked this 100 times, but there seems to be no answer. What will solve this? It seems like no matter what we do, no matter how many ceremonies we have, no matter how much money we give, how many resources we give, how many Indigenous national days we have, of which there are countless on the calendar, it seems as if it's just never enough. And I'd like to know, what will be enough? Is it reparations? Is it land titles? Does this all have to do with money? Because it seems to me that successive governments have done absolutely everything else that can possibly be done. I mean, there's a welcome to country at every single diplomatic ceremony. Every government office has Indigenous flags flying. The Indigenous education in schools is extensive. Even monetary support, financial support for Indigenous people, resources, educational opportunities are plentiful. The genuine question I'm asking is, what more can be done so Indigenous people and also these fringe groups that are around them that are pushing this victimhood narrative feel that reparations have been paid and that we are now on an equal playing field and we can progress as one. And I truly see the frustration every single day from people on my social media who truly want to do better, who want to understand, who want to empathize with Indigenous people. They've read the history, they associate with Indigenous people, they want to do right by them, they pay their respects, they learn about the culture, they're happy that a big chunk of their taxes go to helping Indigenous people and upholding the culture in this country, but they're frustrated because despite all of this, they are still being called racist. They're still being called names that they don't identify as and that are cruel. And they're made to feel terrible and like they're a bad person purely because of the color of their skin, ironically. Because they're white people, especially if they have an Anglo-Saxon background, that they're being told that their forefathers were evil people and they had absolutely no part in this. They truly want to be an ally and they express no hate or no resentment towards Indigenous people. They did nothing to create this situation. They're actually doing a lot to help it, yet, and all they're seeing is hate. How do you think that they feel? They feel incredibly resentful and frustrated, and it makes them not want to support Indigenous organizations or Indigenous people anymore. I really think because Australia is such a young country, we lose a lot of perspective about what has happened in history. As I said, I'm not Anglo-Saxon, I am actually Greek heritage. And when I look through the history of Greece, it is littered with constant wars, with anguish and bloodshed and atrocities. And believe me, that is a much longer history than Australia's history. Let me quickly run you through it. Greece, or Athens as it was back then, fought off Sparta and Persia after huge wars that almost destroyed them. They were then ruled by Rome for like 200 years. Obviously, Rome had an empire that spanned the globe. After that, the Ottomans came in and colonized them for 400 years. After that, the Ottoman Empire came in and hung around for 400 years, killing millions of Greeks, raping the women. Why do you think we have dark hair? It's not because Greeks are naturally dark. It's because the Ottomans were around for so long. And then they were liberated, they built themselves back up again. And this is no easy feat. Imagine being occupied for 400 years. Your religion, your language, your way of life, everything being taken away from you. They had to go underground and hide in caves to maintain their religion and have church services. This is not just one generation. These are successive generations that the Ottomans tried to destroy them. And it would have been so tough to maintain that culture. But you know what? They did it because they were so strong and steadfast. Defeat was not an option for them. And then they were finally liberated from the Ottoman Empire. They gained their sovereignty again, and then World War II happened. Germany invaded, occupied them for 4 years, which is obviously nothing in the scheme of the Greek history, but they did kill 400,000 Greeks, which is massive for a country that is relatively small. And then finally after that, the Allies liberated them, and ever since then, they have been a sovereign nation. My point in using Greece as an example is not to toot my own country's horn, but to illustrate that this has been happening all over the globe for thousands of years. Colonization is not isolated to Australia, far from it. Yeah, there are a lot of scars, and they probably continue to this day, but they've made a decision that they're not going to be a victim. They made that decision long ago. Do I go to Turkey and hate everyone and call everyone racist? No, of course I don't. Because firstly, I realized that this is just what happened back then. This is the world and this is history. This is the history of humanity. And number two, I also realized that the current day Turks didn't commit these atrocities. It's not their fault, just as much as it's not modern day Anglo-Saxons' fault in Australia who committed atrocities against Indigenous people. No one owes anyone anything. Yes, paying respect would be nice, acknowledging would be nice, but no one is entitled to reparations, land rights, an endless supply of money. I think these older countries, like countries in Europe, kind of all realize that they all screwed each other over really badly. And now they've just decided to get on with it. They want progress. They don't want to be held back by guilt or shame. Everyone just wants to move on. And that seems to be the recipe for success. The best way to prosper, for everyone to do better, is just to make peace and to move on united as one. Because we are stronger as one than divided. And this is what these fringe groups try and make us be. They want us to be divided, so we're constantly arguing, so there's no progress made. Taken straight from the socialist and communist playbook. Keep everyone down so no one rises, so no one prospers. But that is such a miserable way to live. What are we gaining now from all this talk about cancellation and not allowing people to celebrate their own country? Absolutely nothing. We're just going backwards. We're just miserable. The only people that are benefiting from this are the media outlets, because they have stories to write about and people click on them. But in terms of our happiness as a nation, I think we have gone backward. And we see this in all of the polls. People don't like it. People don't like being treated like they're racist, because they're not. They know in their hearts that they don't hate anyone for their race at all. All they want is to be able to work their honest day's work, come home, feed their families, put a roof over their heads, be nice to people, celebrate with friends and family. What's so bad about that? I think the message of Australia Day moving forward shouldn't be so stuck in the past, but it should be about recognition of the past, but also celebration of what we've achieved, and also hope for the future. All of us. Everything I've said includes Indigenous people. I want them along for the journey. Of course I do. I view Indigenous people the same as everyone else. And for some reason, people who just want to be perpetual victims view them as isolated and different, which actually compounds the problem. Let's all unite under the one flag like the United States does. Celebrate the past, celebrate where we are now, and also celebrate the future and where we could be, because there is so much potential if we just do it all together.